اللهم علمنا ما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So first of all, my apologies. I'm traveling and it was hard to bring my camera and things. So I'm not reading from the English book, right? So I know many of you do read Arabic and many of you don't. So today I'm just going to be talking based on this book, inshallah ta'ala. Um, so what is this book, right? This book, you can just imagine what it is just by knowing who these people are. So here we have the Sheikh Muhammad ibn Ali al-Maliki al-Hassani. He is in Saudi Arabia. He is a traditional scholar. Traditional scholar meaning Maliki, so he follows one of the four madhahib, meaning he's learned in Hadith. He understands Hadith methodology and very learned in Hadith. He has many works in Hadith and in ulum Quran and tafsir, etc. He is Ash'ari, right? Mu'tadil, right? So he's an Ash'ari, but he is not. He understands that what the difference between being extreme is and what not extreme, and being that what's the goal of Aqidah? The goal of Aqidah is yaqeen. It is not philosophy, etc. He's also Sufi, right? So when I say traditional scholar, I'm going to be pretty blunt. Every traditional scholar that you ever interact with is either part of a tariqah, a Sufiya, or is pro-Tasawwuf one way or the other, right? Every single person you ever think about, including Ibn Taymiyyah, including Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, including everybody, right? And so that's the picture that you see when you think about a traditional scholar. That's how they are, right? Jama'at Tabligh, right? Everybody's heard of Jama'at Tabligh, Tabligh Jama'at,
Yes.
right? So who set them up and who organized them all? People who are Hanafi, Maturidi, and either Chishti or a combination of other different tariqas. So everybody is somehow related, right? I asked, for example, the question like, who's in this class? Like, oh, so and so. I'm studying with Sheikh Omar Mohsen. So Sheikh Omar Mohsen, Shafi'i, Ash'ari, Ba'alawi, right? Everybody is connected somehow to something. That's just like how people are. Everybody's like that. So here we have the Sheikh, right? Here we have the Sheikh, the former Mufti of Azhar, right? Sheikh al-Azhar, Mufti al-Gum'ah, Ash'ari, Shadili, Shafi'i, right? The author of Kharida Bahiyya that we did in Aqidah, for example, Khalwati, Maliki, Ash'ari, right? Everybody is like that, right? Everybody's like that. So they are either one of the four madhahib. That's a traditional scholar is always one of the four madhahib, and they are basically Ash'ari, Maliki, Maturidi, or Hanbali, right? Or slash Athari, which is a similar thing. They basically all have the same aqidah and they have the same mafahim. They have the same concepts, i.e., what is iman, what is kufr, what is an authority, a religious authority, what is valid debate, um, uh, uh, what is the goal of the Sharia, etc. Right? What is qata'i, what is not qata'i, what is dhanni, etc. So if we just understand that there is a scholar who is like that, and he lives in Saudi Arabia in the last century and this century, and he writes a book on concepts, ideas, fundamental things that need to be corrected, you can guess exactly what he's talking about. You can guess already what he's talking about, right? So, for example, in Saudi Arabia, and the ideas that came out of Saudi Arabia, are they pro-Sufi or anti-Sufi?
Anti-Sufi.
Anti-Sufi, right? So if you say the word Sufi today, everyone's like, oh, what's that? That's weird, right? That sounds strange, right? So that's strange. Whereas that doesn't make any sense because you look at all the big scholars, everyone's like pro-Sufi. So anybody you quote is going to be like pro-Sufi. Like, so Ibn Taymiyyah is Qadiri. Most of the big Hanbalis are Qadiris, right? Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi, Qadiri, right? They studied literally with Abdul Qadir Jilani, right? Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi, his cousin, same thing, right? If you go through the Tabaqat of Hanabila, look at the Hanbali scholars of the past that created the, the Hanbali scholars of Saudi Arabia, they're all Sufi. Everybody's like that. So, okay, you might criticize certain things about Sufis, and that's fine. We can, that's true. If you come and ask me, and I say, if you say the word Sufi, I say be scared. The default with Sufi is scared. But the idea, the concept, the mafhum, that Tasawwuf is something weird and strange and alien to Islam, this is mafhum yajib an yusahhah, right? This is a concept that has to be corrected because that's not true at all. I mentioned Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Imam Nawawi, Ibn Qayyim, right? Ibn Qayyim, if you look at Ibn Qayyim's books, Ibn Qayyim is heavily referenced by Saudi-esque scholars. His books are all to do with Tasawwuf. And he basically uses the books of Imam, he basically uses Ihya al-Ulumuddin by Imam al-Ghazali and builds on it. Right? So Ibn al-Jawzi, right? Not Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, but Ibn al-Jawzi much before him. His book Sifat al-Safwa, right, is all about Sifat al-Safwa. The reason it sounds like Sufi, that's because he took the book Tabaqat al-Sufiyya, the stories of the Sufis, and turned it into the book Sifat al-Safwa. So, the whole idea, like that's a whole concept that again, you come into a masjid and you say Sufi, everyone's like, in their mind, over the last 50 years, the mind of the average Muslim has been told Sufi is weird. Sufi is something outside of Islam. Sufi is kufr. Sufi is something that, and just the whole concept is off. The whole concept of what is Tasawwuf and what it's all about is totally off. So he says this is mafhum yajib an yusahhah. This is a concept that needs to be corrected because you're saying something crazy. Right? You're saying something crazy. Right? And it's part of a pick and choose methodology where certain scholars have selected certain things from the past and deleted other things, sometimes even physically, like literally removing them from books to change them of form, to change the understanding of what's going on. Okay, so we can imagine what this book's about. What about following the form of madhahib? Do you think as a Maliki, somebody who is Maliki, who understands fiqh, who understands religious authority, who understands, for example, the other madhahib and understands religious authority there, and then somebody comes along and says, no, the hadith is sahih, or no, this is my fatwa. Do you think there's a mafhum, there's a concept there that's fundamentally lost? Yes, right? So there's a concept there that's fundamentally lost. And so this is a mafhum yajib an yusahhah, right? That there's such thing as a clear proof of something that's not a clear proof, dalil qat'i, dalil dhanni, and إنما اختلفنا في الأدلة الظنية, we only disagree on issues that are debatable, and that's why we have difference of agreement, because it's not clear and we understand things in different ways. And then there is authority, meaning large bodies of scholars have adopted certain opinions and built on them, and large bodies of scholars have adopted other opinions and built on them in a different way. So therefore there is difference of agreement, a different set of answers, and these things are called the form of madhahib, right? It's a simple, complex, but it's very easy for people to be totally lost on it, totally lost, like have no idea what it is, how to interact with it, and just kind of be confused. Okay? No, go, you can, this is just an introductory class, okay? So I'm just going to go over the key mabahith, the key things that he's going to talk about in this book. And so go ahead, Yusuf, you had a question?
Yeah, Shaykhana, for Sayyid Muhammad, was he Shadani?
I don't think so. I think it's Ba'alawi.
Okay, jazakallah
Yeah,
khair.
that's not fundamental, but I'm pretty sure he's Ba'alawi. Okay, so so again, my apologies. If you look in the English, you should be able to see the list right in the beginning. It has a whole list of topics. There's this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic. Generally speaking, it should follow along with these things, but I'm just going to just kind of show you. Again, for those who can read Arabic, it's fine. For those who can't, I'm just going to say in English so you have a general idea. Okay, so he's going through different key topics, right? One of the most important topics is التحذير من المجازفة بالتكفير, warning people not to be so trigger happy with labeling other people as kuffar, right? This is a major problem. And again, for those who know something about history, we understand that the Wahhabi movement, right, the Wahhabi movement did militarize this takfir, and there are key events in history where many Muslims have been killed, right, by other Muslims with the da'wah that these people are not Muslim, right? This is a major thing that somebody says this, somebody does this, or somebody says this, or someone's from that group, they're not a Muslim, right? And we should kill them, right? And in reality, this is a connection, right, between the Khawarij, right, which is another sect of Islam, and Wahhabism, okay? So it's a connection. Now, Wahhabism, somebody who was Wahhabi does not identify as Khariji. They do not identify in that group. They don't have the same creed. However, much of their creed, many things that they promote are actually from that group, right? And so you find people, again, even in recent times, saying that, for example, if somebody goes to a shrine and you're able to kill them, you should kill them, right? Somebody visits a shrine of a wali of Allah, of some kind of saint, you go to some shrine in Egypt or Pakistan, and you're able to kill them, you should, right? This is something that certain scholars, modern scholars, have said, right, from this group, and this is very dangerous, right? Very dangerous. So this is one of these things he's going to talk about. And he's going to talk specifically, and he's going to go to historical things about recording particular essay or letters and essays by Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab, may Allah forgive him. And um, he's going to talk about his actual, what he said and what he didn't say, and what things have been ascribed to him that are not actually his at all. And this is very important. So it's very important to understand that a lot of what we see today, again, is a product of editing out. That you certain quotes from Hadith or Quran versus certain quotes from the Salaf versus certain quotes from the Imams versus certain quotes from scholars that created this a set of ideas that are spread, right? Either in the complete form, you have somebody who was a full-on Wahhabi, this is what I believe, or in their incomplete form, meaning people have certain ideas here and there. Someone understands this or someone understands that. But it's all based on incomplete pictures, right? An incomplete picture of this plus incomplete picture of this plus incomplete, and it's created like that. And so it's very important to go back to, for example, under reading the complete works of Ibn Taymiyyah and the complete works of Imam Ahmad and the complete works of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab to be like, oh, what does he actually say? As opposed to what is he quoted to have said at this particular time or in this particular context or etc. So he talks about some of those things. I'm going to skip this. Concept of, we already mentioned this thing here, right? The key concepts, again, about when we're talking about shirk and when we talk about shirk and people having crazy aqidah issues, if you do this, it's shirk. If you do that, it's shirk. So he's going to clarify the most fundamental and obvious thing that anybody who studies any book in classical aqidah will understand is the difference between the created and the creator. So that fundamental difference is obvious to certain people and it solves issues very easily for certain people. But for other people, they're just totally lost, right? They don't understand what Allah is, and they treat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as something big and amazing that they can't see. And if anything else takes on anything like that, it's also great and unseen. It must be the same as Allah. And so, uh, uh, making a clear line between Allah and His creation and understanding those differences helps a lot, right? Helps. It's a huge thing. Now, if you come along and change that, change your understanding of what Allah is, and change your understanding, then it's very easy for these things to be mixed up. Okay, he's also going to talk about language, right? So key concept to put in our minds. In the world in general, and in the Muslim world specific, there is a war on history and there is a war on language, right? So one of the most important things we need to do for our kids is make sure that they understand language, any language. It doesn't matter what it is, but they understand language in general, right? Language arts is very, very important. Literature is very important. Understanding language, that they play with language and expressions of language, you understand these things, because there is a war on language in general, and there's a war on history, right? In every country wants to erase history in order to rewrite it, etc., or to just make ignorant people. This is a key agenda of many, many countries. And again, if we understand history, 90% of our problems go away. So the average guy on the street who says, but why should I follow a madhab? The Sahaba didn't follow madhahib, right? You read a history book, a book of history, and you read about people of the past, you realize they did actually follow madhahib, but like, oh, I didn't realize that. Or why would I do that? Oh, because everybody does that. Say, oh, okay, right? You change what is the default setting in your mind, right? So history is very important. And then here he talks about al-majaz al-aqli. Majaz al-aqli is a form of metaphor, right? A form of metaphor. And he said this is a very common and normal form of metaphor in all sorts of languages and English and everything. And people get caught up on it. And they end up saying things that are crazy, right? And they say, oh, if you say this, you say that this person does this or that person does this or whatever, this is shirk. And it's like, no, you just don't understand basic language. You have an inability to interact with language on a basic level. The action of the nation of the narration, the nature of human actions, how we describe them, how the Mu'tazila, for example, looked at human actions, and how we as Sunnis look at human actions. And if we understand this properly, again, we have no issues. And then he goes on to issue of veneration, right? Veneration. What is the difference between veneration and worship? Right? So recently we just had the Mawlid, right? Oh, that's venerating the Prophet ﷺ. You're celebrating his birthday. You're worshipping the Prophet ﷺ. What is the fine line between veneration and worship? Right? Where does that line, where do we draw that line? When does it get to a point that you are actually worshipping the Prophet ﷺ, or worshipping this saint, or worshipping this thing, or whatever it is, or worshipping your teacher, right? Because if you do whatever your teacher says, then isn't that worship? How does it work? Right? And then he goes on to bid'ah, the concept of bid'ah, right? So again, another thing in the Wahhabi world is this is bid'ah and that's bid'ah, and it doesn't have a system, right? Because Salafism is a new thing, Wahhabism is a new thing. There is no refined concept of what is considered a bid'ah, and so therefore it's kind of chaotic. It's chaotic, and also it kind of usually points at certain things based on a certain idea, right? And so making that key distinction between these two things, etc. Right? The necessity, so it says here, تفريق ضروري بين البدعة الشرعية واللغوية. What is difference, what is a key fundamental difference between we say bid'ah as something new and bid'ah as something new and bad in the Sharia, right? Then he's going on to think about Tasawwuf. He says da'wah to a'immat Tasawwuf. He says, talking about the imams of Tasawwuf and how they encourage people to follow the Sharia. So again, key concept, Sufi, somebody goes around dancing. Sufi is another religion, right? Sufi, that's, anybody who understands it, it's not the case. Rather, Tasawwuf is the science of ihsan. So therefore, essentially, right, the science of ihsan, i.e. the science of how to be as if you were worshipping Allah as though you saw him, right? That's the science. So therefore, essentially, it has nothing to do with aqidah. And essentially, it has nothing to do with fiqh, right? It's like tajweed. Tajweed does not talk about fiqh, essentially. Tajweed does not talk about akhlaq, essentially, right? Arabic grammar has nothing to do with aqidah, right? That's Arabic grammar. It's a different topic. So tasawwuf is, so when you say that person's Sufi, what's his aqidah? There's no such thing as an aqidah Sufiya. It doesn't exist because so tasawwuf doesn't even talk about aqidah. But again, if you don't know what it is, then it ends up becoming something crazy, right? So he's just talking about how if you look at the people who have built this science called Tasawwuf, the Imams of Tasawwuf, all of them are talking about somebody who encourages on an absolute level, abiding by the Sharia and abiding by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that anything else has no place in their life whatsoever. But yet, for some strange reason, and often because of the way that certain people behave who ascribe themselves to Tasawwuf, it's become totally confused. Then he goes on to Haqiqat al-Ash'ari. What do you mean by Ash'ari? What is this thing? Oh, that's something other than Islam. There's Sunni Islam, and then there's Ash'ari Islam, right? So this is a key thing you have to understand, is that every group will try and every sect, when I say sect, I mean somebody who sees themselves as right and other people as wrong, right? Every single sect. So like Sunni Islam is a sect, right? We see Kharijis and Shi'is as wrong, right? Right? Mu'tazila are a sect. They see, for example, other people as wrong. Now, if you ask a Mu'tazili sees himself as Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? He sees himself as, I am the one who is right and you guys are something else, right? A Wahhabi also sees that. So this language that has come out recently is that there's something called Sunni Islam, which is normal, i.e. Wahhabi, and then Ash'ari and Maturidi is something else. That's something like weird, right? And so he's just defining what is the reality of Ash'ari. When we say the Ash'ari, we say an Ash'ari. What is Ash'ari? What is Maturidi? What are these things in reality? No, he's not going through Aqidah proper. He's just saying that that's all it is. Right? And again, certain quotes from certain people, Wahhabi will frequently quote Ibn Taymiyyah, but again, selectively. Because the problem with Ibn Taymiyyah is at the end of the day, he is a traditional scholar. He's a traditional scholar who has certain opinions that are off, as opposed to somebody who is not a traditional scholar to begin with. Right? So here he's quoting, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah. Again, this is going to be in English. He says, "Wal ulama wa ansaru furu' ad-din." He says the ulama are people who supported and promoted and explained and defended the details of halal and haram. Wal ash'ariyya ansaru usul ad-din. He says, as for the Ash'aris, they are the people who supported and protected the bases of the deen, i.e. aqidah itself. So that's a problem. That statement's a huge problem for a Wahhabi, because I thought Ash'aris were kuffar, or at least Ahl Bid'ah, they're something crazy. Whereas here, Ibn Taymiyyah is saying totally different. So again, the key concept is that you can change history and change the present by selectively picking things from the past, right? Selectively picking things from the past. And then he's going to go on to Tawassul. What is Tawassul? It's asking Allah through something, using an intermediary. Or Allah, I ask you by this, or I ask you through this, right? Things that everybody agrees on. How the scholars of the past Uh, so it mentions, for example, the people doing Tawassul before the Prophet was ever alive, like Sayyidina Adam and like the Jews, etc. The Jews doing Tawassul through the Prophet, the Jews saying, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala um, by the Prophet to give them success over the kuffar. People doing Tawassul through the Prophet during his life and after his life, and quoting the Hadith, etc. regarding that. Doing Tawassul through the Prophet on Judgment Day, right? Tawassul and as explained by Ibn Taymiyyah, according to how it is in the eyes of Imam Ahmad and Ibn Taymiyyah, in the eyes of other people, etc. And then and then here, shrine worship, right? Shrine worship and relic worship. These are these kind of things, right? If you ask everybody, just Google it now. Tell me what comes up. Google shrine worship in Islam or relic worship in Islam. So just yesterday, right? And somebody asked this question on one of Sheikh Omar Mohsin's groups, or is it? Can one do tabarruk with the mushaf? Like, is that someone asked this question? Is it halal to take baraka from the mushaf? I'll let you guys tell me what your results are from Google, and then we'll discuss that, inshallah.
I got a a Quora question, and then various
Yeah,
people.
what does it say?
Is visiting holy shrine, dargahs, or graves haram in Islam? One person said yes, and an explanation that is similar to what you explained before that people say.
Okay.
Somebody says somebody here gives some other explanation similar to what you've explained.
Okay. Right, it's whatever, it's kufur, it's this, it's that. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
Sharif, Ali Ishtiyaq, how are you doing?
Yeah, on seeking tabarruk with the mushaf, there's some sites that say it's permissible, but there's the Salafi ones that say no, this is not permissible.
Right, so can you see how kind of crazy it gets, right? It's like everyone's familiar, like let's say in a normal world, it's like the concept of baraka, right? So in anybody, like I remember my grandma, non-Muslim, she had a CD, a video at her house called Baraka, and it was basically it was a video film that had no words in it, just looking at nature, and it's called Baraka, right? So the concept of Baraka, right? That's a kind of a thing, like, oh, there's Baraka in this, take this, there's Baraka in it, right? The division, the gap between Baraka and Shirk is just something that's just like understood by kids in the street. It's like I don't worship in the Musaf, am I? But I know that it's blessed, right? This is a blessed thing. And then suddenly we've got to this insane thing where if you think there's barakah in a Musaf and it can benefit, and like let's say for example I was sick and I held it, do you think it's going to help me? It's like, of course it's going to help you. It's like, do you think it's a Mubarak place because the Mus'haf used to be, that room has more barakah in it because the Mus'haf used to be there, of course. So that's a kind of an obvious thing, and then suddenly it's now shirk. It's like, wow. Right? Somebody asked a question not long ago about is it shirk to take barakah from the Kaaba? Like, what do you mean? Like, I mean, of course it's barakah, like, or touch, why? So that's kind of something obvious, but suddenly it's become not so obvious. And something it's kind of silly, right? And so this is a key thing that that concept of barakah, the Prophet ﷺ sharing things from himself, people getting things from the Prophet ﷺ, the idea that something barakah, the Jews taking the tabut, taking the what's it called? The Ark of the Covenant, this thing that's carrying the Ten Commandments with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, carrying it with them, and wherever they go, and there's barakah in that. That's the source of barakah, right? You face the Qibla and there's barakah in facing the Qibla, right? You say Bismillah, you say there's barakah in that, right? So this idea of barakah, right, tapping into a good from Allah through something that Allah has created. This is something that is kind of obvious. Zamzam, like you drink Zamzam, there's Baraka in Zamzam, Baraka in this. And then suddenly it's now shirk. Right? All the line between it and shirk is ashwa'i, is random. Because it doesn't really make any sense. Right? And more importantly, contravenes the way of the Salaf. It contravenes the way of Salaf. So what I can do is come along and pick certain quotes from the Salaf and come up with an answer like that. But in reality, if you look at the Salaf in general, you look at the first generation, second, third generation, so something just widespread. There's just something that's kind of obvious and widespread. And then suddenly it's turned into shirk. This is what he's trying to talk about. All these random ideas that suddenly have become new ideas that never existed before. And then B, they suddenly become widespread, and you find them on Quora, and you find them on people asking these questions. People just generally confused.
The AI assistant that it says it separates it into Islamic teaching, Sufi perspective, Orthodox Islamic view, Shia perspective. And it says that in the Sufi perspective, shrine veneration is seen as a means of seeking spiritual guidance and blessings from the merit of the prophet or saint. And in the Orthodox Islamic view, it says it's a form of shirk or polytheism.
There we go. So even AI has defined, or rather its sources has defined orthodox what is not actually orthodox, at least not normal, right? So we can say whether it's right or wrong, it's just not normal. It's just like not a normal thing to say, you know. You'll find, for example, Imam al-Dhahabi saying this times and times again. That you go to this maqam and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that place, and it's what is it called? Like something al-iskir al-mujarrab. It's like everybody knows that, right? So Muhammad has a question. We won't answer that question now. When we come to it, okay? When we come to it, we'll talk about it. What I'm trying to say is, here today we're just looking at what does he talk about, right? What does he talk about? So here he's talking about asking Allah through things that the Prophet have left over, etc. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the right of the Prophet and by the right of the Anbiya and by the right of the Salihin. Asking Allah by the right of those who ask upon him. How Aisha radiallahu anha asked Allah by the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, these are kind of things. How it happened during the time of Sayyidina Umar, on the Battle of Yamama, how the Sahaba did Tawassul through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though it was right after him. What does it even mean when Sayyidina Umar did Tawassul through Abbas? Etc. Differences, so claim of some people that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't hear us and doesn't see us and doesn't know us, for example. This is again contrary to Hadith, etc. And again, contrary to their own Imams. That's the thing. So here, for example, he has a book here, Ibn Qayyim, in his book Kitab al-Ruh. He says, "As-salaf mujmi'una ala hadha, wa qad tawatarat al-athar anhum." Right. So Ibn Qayyim, he said the early Muslims are totally agree that this where is it? come to it, inshallah. So these are all topics. Can the Prophet ﷺ, does the Prophet ﷺ even know what we're saying? Etc. Sahaba seeking shafa'a from the Prophet ﷺ. And then al-isti'ana or al-istighatha or turning, right? And these are key things. What's the difference between life and death? Right? Asking somebody who's alive versus asking somebody who's dead. Is there a difference? What about asking something that somebody can do or somebody who can't do? Right? These are all discussions. Again, these are very low level, obvious questions that anybody can understand. But then suddenly today it's become an issue of confusion for people. What it means when you ask Allah, and when you seek help from Allah, etc., etc., etc. And then he goes again through historical things. So it's again very important to understand that there is a movement, right? You might hear one scholar today from this movement. He does not necessarily represent A, the scholars of that world. B, he doesn't necessarily represent the founder of that world. So the world what's in Sheikh Muhammad Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's mind, and what is in their mind is not the same thing. What is in Ibn Taymiyyah's mind and their mind is very different. What's in Imam Ahmad's mind and their mind is very different. Right? And suddenly they have become the somebody who's representing or being backed by these things, or that the whole ummah has these opinions, which is just totally wrong. Right? Then next thing then is about how the Prophet, describing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, things that are unique to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, etc. And it goes on. Okay, but you can see basically the ideas he's talking about. These are low-level discussions. These are not high-level discussions. Right? In Aqidah, we talk about high-level discussions. In fiqh, we talk about lower-level discussions usually, but in usul fiqh, high-level. But these are low-level discussions that have suddenly become very, very confusing because everything has changed in a night, in a day and a night. Okay? So, inshallah, this is what we're going to be going through over the next, I don't know, 2 to 3 months. Making sure we understand these things in English. So again, my apologies that today has been in Texas in Arabic again because I was traveling. I am traveling, and I didn't bring my camera with me. It's hard to bring the book and etc. But that's basically what we have for today. So, does anybody have any questions to start off with?
Did you say?
Ask your question.
Oh, okay. Did you say that the author of this book is still alive?
No, he passed away. I
Rahim.
don't know, rahimahullah. I don't know how long ago. Not recently, quite some time ago.
Oh, okay.
Beginning of this century, so I don't know exactly. I think maybe 10 years ago, or maybe less than that. I'm not sure.
But Wahhabis got him actually. Sheikh, I was going to ask. So Ibn Taymiyyah, he himself said the Ash'ari were the defenders of the creed, even though he differed with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Differed with that.
So he like basically this is the thing is what happens. It's like cherry picking representation of him. So that's what happened. The people who say like, oh, like Ibn Taymiyyah would not agree with them. Imam Ahmad would not agree with them. But if you take certain quotes, it works, and certain quotes here and certain quotes there, right? But the whole picture is off.
No.
So Ibn Taymiyyah, he has certain key things, right? So Ibn Taymiyyah has, certain key things that he's saying, but he's saying, yeah, they're the Ansar of the Deen and they're this and they're that. He has lots of praise. Ibn Taymiyyah has lots of praise of Ash'ari.
No.
He just has particular issues here and there. And in general, he and certain other Hanbalis, they do see that the Maturidis and Ash'aris are kind of like Neo-Mu'tazila. Right? They do say that. Like they see them, they're like, you're good, but you're kind of going off. Like if you're not on the edge, if you're either on the edge or off the edge.
Because of ilm al-kalam possibly?
Because of doing ta'wil. You do ta'wil, and also because of the way that you deal with aql, right? So basically, for certain Hanabila, they are kind of happy to say things that are غير معقول, that don't actually make any sense, but they say it doesn't need to make any sense. It's in the Quran and Sunnah and khalas. Whereas for the Ashis and Maturidis, they're not going to say something. They're going to say, well, either you don't know what it means, or you say what it means, and it has to make actual sense what you're saying, right? So the way that so when you see Ibn Taymiyyah talking, it's sometimes like I don't think on some of these kalam issues, like he doesn't, it's almost like a Christian, right? Like when you talk to a Christian, and astaghfirullah, I'm not saying he's a kafir or anything like a Christian. I'm just saying in the way they deal with the mind, like when you with a Christian, you say, hey, the Trinity doesn't make logical sense. They're like, that's fine. That's not a problem. It's divine. It doesn't have to make logical sense, does it? So for Ibn Taymiyyah and certain Hanbalis, that same approach is there. Like it doesn't actually have to make logical sense. Whereas we wouldn't say that. We say the mind and revelation are always go hand in hand. There's no contradiction ever. That's how traditional Sunni Muslims for the last 1,000 years have seen things, meaning Asharis and Maturidis, right? But he will say things like that doesn't really make sense. Like so, for example, he's talking about Allah being in a place.
Okay,
he's like, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the sky, but it doesn't mean that the sky is above him. So I could take his quote and say he agrees with us, like Allah is not physically in a space, because he says, A'udhu billah, don't imagine that any part of the sky is above him. Okay, so what does in mean? So he doesn't, they just kind of believe in, they don't really believe in this kind of that whole way of thinking, like don't even define it, just leave it as it is, right? Which if done properly is fine. Like if you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on the throne in a way that's not temporal, that's not spatial, etc. Yeah, it's fine. But then what does it mean on then if it's not spatial, right? They're like, don't even go there. Don't ask that question. That's not adab. We would say, okay, I know it's not adab, but I need to answer it because otherwise I don't even know what I'm saying, right? They're like, it's okay. You don't need to know what you're saying. Just leave it, right? So, but the point is, he is not being represented. Like if you take the collective work and the collective ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah, he is a Hanbali. Okay, he is a Hanbali in fiqh. Yes, he has one or two ikhtiyarat. That's he has his own opinions here and there, but otherwise he's a Hanbali, right? Whereas Wahhabi is not Hanbali, and he is Athari. And so in the Hanbali Aqidah, they kind of have two kind of ways of doing things. The later scholars and many of the early scholars, it's very clear what they are, and he's clearly not that, right? I don't have time to talk about it in a lot of detail here. So he's Sufi, he is Sunni in Aqidah, basically, and he is Hanbali. Whereas that's not the picture we have today. Right. So if you look at modern proper Hanbalis, right, there are certain modern proper Hanbalis, they are Hanbali in fiqh, right? They are Sufi generally, because basically all late scholars are Sufi in the sense that they're either part of a tariqah or in general connected to it. Like the late Mauritanians, most of them are not connected to a particular tariqah, but they are all pro-Tasawwuf in the general sense, right? And then they're all athari in the sense of a real aqidah. Okay, Omar?
Barakallah fik.
Okay, anybody else? Somebody has not spoken yet. And then I'll go into Ma'ab.
Jazakallah khair for giving us the quick introduction. But I had a question, or can you explain, like, in the easiest way, like what Sufi means? Because like all the things that I've heard about are not coming from the correct sources. So I'm kind of confused, like when you say that it's not related to fiqh or aqidah, then how would you define like who a Sufi is?
Okay, so Tasawwuf is the organized science of ihsan, right? So now in Risalat Jami'ah, you talk about Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. And at the end of Risalat Jami'ah, it talks about, for example, sins of the heart, right? Pride and this. Okay? So if you can think about Quran as a science and think about tajweed as the organized science of how you sit down and learn the rules of pronunciation, right? So tasawwuf is to ihsan what tajweed is to the Quran. So in
Okay.
tajweed, for example, when I do tajweed, I say, oh, in Hafs and Asim, you recite it like this. You're like, what's that? What's Hafs and Asim? That's something specific. That's like a specific scholar, isn't it? So yeah. So according to Imam Ghazali, this is how you do it. According to Imam Abu Hassan Shadhili, this is how you do it. It's like, oh, why do you have different ways? Yeah, there's different ways of A, defining these sicknesses of the heart, and B, remedying them, and different ways of analyzing them, and different ways of focusing on this and focusing on that. But basically what you're doing is there is a thing called spirituality, how you are internally, which is not the same as Aqidah, because Aqidah is what I believe in. It's not the same as my what I'm going to physically do, but it's how I feel, right? Right now, do I feel in the presence of Allah? Do I not feel in the presence of Allah? Do I feel proud about myself, or am I humble, or do I have reverence for other Muslims, or do I have disdain for other Muslims? These are these feelings. What are they? How do you categorize them, and how do you deal with them? That's called tasawwuf.
Okay, so then can a non-scholar call himself a Sufi?
Yeah, in the sense that they're working on it, but often that means that's like somebody who's reading Sahih Bukhari calling themselves a muhaddith. So usually a
Okay.
muhaddith means somebody who's actually like got there. A Sufi, but like mashallah, guy's a Sufi, like the guy's like he's actually got there, as opposed to somebody who's just learning.
Okay. And this is like different from
So if you ask me, you'd say free, do you identify yourself as a Sufi? Say no, I do not identify myself as a Sufi.
okay, I
Right?
see. But nowadays people understand it as like a sect. So
Yeah, they
then
understand it as some kind of weird sect, like as if
if you agree with Sufism, you're Sufi. It's not like
it's
alim or there's specific
yeah. So it
qualifications.
would be like yeah. So
Okay.
then if you say if you say the word Sufi, people get thrown off, get scared. If you say certain words are associated to it, like Rumi or Ghazali, they get scared, right? Because they're programmed to be sensitive to these things, right?
Okay. Yeah, we
Even
had to
though
rewind.
again Imam Ghazali, so look at again Imam Ghazali, just like all the Hanbalis use his works.
Hmm.
But if you're not Hanbali and you're not Shafi'i, you're not Maliki, you're not Hanafi, like what are you? Like you don't even exist in the history of Islam, basically. Abdul, so somebody, for example, who goes specifically to go and learn tasawwuf from Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, who was a very, very famous Sufi, is obviously Sufi. Someone like Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, right? These kind of people. So, or that you. So these people. So what I'm trying to say is, when you say a traditional scholar, they are. When I say they're Sufi, in the sense that they are ascribed to something, they identify with something. They are like they see it as a thing. Maybe not one particular tariqah. They're not actually in a particular tariqah or this or that, But they just like, yeah, this whole thing is good, right? So like Imam Nawawi, like what is Imam Nawawi? Imam Nawawi is a traditional scholar, major important commentator on Sahih Muslim, major significant, most what I want to argue the most significant person in the Shafi school, and author of Arba'in Nawawiyya that everybody reads and everybody values. And he has a book, Bustan al-Arifin, the Garden of al-Arifin. Arif means somebody who knows Allah. That is a Sufi term. So if you come along and say that book is nothing to do with Tasawwuf and Imam Nawawi is not a Sufi, it's like you're a Jahil. Doesn't make any sense. Like, why would he use a Sufi term and talk about Tasawwuf, but then not actually be Sufi, right? And so the way they have to function the way you have to function as a Wahhabi is a bit like how you have to function as an Israeli occupier, right? And again, hashahum, Wahhabis are Muslims, right? And inshallah they have good intentions, right? I'm not talking about like you have to ignore okay, let's forget Israeli occupiers. Americans, like how do you have to function as Americans? Like nobody in America is American because 1,000 years ago you weren't even here. You just came from Europe and stole people's land and killed them. And there we go. So the way you have to function as American is study very short time American history and think about how America is great, right? But America is not great at all.
Okay, that's very helpful analogy.
So that's that function. So the way a Salafi works then is you basically cut out most of history and cut out things, and then you can compare yourself against certain things, and you kind of feel you make sense. But in reality, if you look at the whole spread of Islamic history, just pick up, for example, Imam Dhahabi's Sir Alam al-Nubala, his huge, biography of scholars of the past. The way you are and the way they were is totally different. Like the way they function and what they believe in and what they do and how they see knowledge is totally different. That makes sense, inshallah.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair.
Okay, anybody else? So Muhammad, you asked a question, or was it before?
Yeah, sorry, Sheikh. It wasn't a question. It was just something that I found on Islam QA from my Google search, stating that visiting a grave of a prophet or a wali is considered shirk. And I just found that very interesting, since
Okay, yeah.
Islam QA poses itself as like a traditional source. So that just goes to your point regarding authority.
And so
orthodoxy.
again is again everybody claims to be the legit thing. Let's say I don't even want to claim to be legit. I just look at history, right? So one key thing to understand is the Shia, for example. The Shia means a sect. Shiat Ali means the group of Ali, right? They see themselves as a minority and they value that, right? That's a key thing. Like we are an underdog. The truth is always oppressed. We are the few, and the most people are off, right? That mentality is the same mentality of the Khawarij and the same mentality as the Wahhabis, right? So when you come along and you tell them most scholars have been like this, they're like, yeah, that's fine, but most scholars are off. Well, at least admit it though, as opposed to claiming that you are normal, right? Claiming that you are the normal person, right? So at least historically, you can say, historically, scholars, books of fiqh over the centuries have always mentioned the recommendation of going to visit the Prophet ﷺ. That's a thing you find in books of fiqh, right? And you can't kind of ignore it. And these are not people who are quote unquote Sufi, like, oh, some crazy guy. This is like Imam Nawawi. This is like Ibn Hajar. This is like so and so, so and so, so and so. Like people who have traditionally represented Orthodox Islam, right? The halal and haram, like people you go to. Allahu Alam. And then kind of a vignette of this is the Qasida al-Burda, right? Of Imam Busiri, right? Mawlaya salli sallam da'iman abadan ala habibika khayna khalqi kullihimi, right? This is a song we hear sung from Morocco to Malaysia, right? It's just been there for like, I don't know what, 600 years, 800 years. Don't know exactly how long it's been there for. And it's just like everybody like sings a song. And that's just normal. Suddenly it's become like, oh my God, that's shirk. There's this, right? So it's not, the point is that you can't, revelation doesn't come and it doesn't, we're not trying to say it has like religious in itself. It's like, oh, because this person said it, it's now, it's now important. Oh, the student of Imam Abu Hassan al-Shadhili said it, so therefore, therefore it's revelation. We're not trying to say that. Obviously, that's crazy. What I'm trying to say is like when the ummah, east to west, north to south, sees something and accepts it and is okay with it, and then you suddenly come along and say, this is really, really bad, this is crazy, right? It's, it's a problem, right? There's something off, there's an issue there, right? Yeah, same thing, right? And so this is what he's talking about, that we see somebody who is from a old traditional Islamic mindset. What does he see when he sees these new ideas, and what does he have to say? And then as a scholar, how can you back his points up saying this is crazy what you're saying, right? And then we're going to see chapter by chapter, inshallah ta'ala, how these whole things, how these work, inshallah. So please make sure you buy the book. In fact, make sure you buy 2 copies of the book, right? Because the book's useful for anybody. The book is useful is for anybody. And whenever you buy a book, you help the translator. When the translator can translate, he can translate more works like this. If you don't buy a book, then the translator will not be able to translate other books like this, and knowledge will not spread. So buying books, be it in English or in Arabic, is, a very, very important. It's like riwayah, right? Like in the past, people used to sit down and have their own riwayah of Sahih Bukhari. It's the same thing today. The way that you can do that today is buying critical editions and good. You say, I'm going to go and buy the best edition of Sahih Bukhari, the best edition of whatever this Hashiyat Al-Adawi on something, or whatever it is you want to buy. Go and have a room in your house that you never enter, right? There's just tons of books in Islamic studies, because that's how you keep things going. And if you don't buy books, scholars can't function and they can't continue to do their work. So it's very important that you buy books, be they in English or in Arabic. Should I stop here? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Inshallah, next week we'll continue with the English book, inshallah.